The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beneath the pale dawn of May 1944. Warships moved like shadows across the restless water, their radars sweeping in slow arcs as the sun broke through the haze. The Imperial Japanese Navy's submarines had been haunting these routes for months, sinking convoys, vanishing without a trace. Every American sailor knew that beneath this vast surface something was waiting, something quiet, deadly, and invisible. For the men aboard USS England, a small Buckley-class destroyer escort, the mission was clear: hunt them down before they struck again. The tension was thick, almost tangible, as if the ocean itself were holding its breath. USS England was not built to be famous. She was modest in size, designed to protect convoys and track submarines using the latest sonar and radar systems. But beneath her steel decks was a crew that had already learned how unpredictable the Pacific could be. They were young, most barely in their 20s, hardened by months of monotony, broken only by bursts of terror. To them, this mission was just another patrol, but history was waiting to etch their names into legend. Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton, the ship's commanding officer, stood on the bridge that morning, studying the waves through binoculars. The humidity clung to his uniform, but his focus never wavered. Intelligence reports had come in from the U.S. Navy's codebreakers at Pearl Harbor. Multiple Japanese submarines were operating in the vicinity of the Solomon Islands. Pendleton knew what that meant. They were part of a secret resupply mission for Japan's crumbling Pacific front. Somewhere out there, the hunters were about to become the hunted. The ocean around them looked deceptively calm, yet beneath the surface the enemy was moving. Japan's I-class submarines were some of the largest in the world, designed not just to sink ships, but to deliver supplies and command missions across thousands of miles. Their crews were desperate now, stretched thin and running low on resources, but still capable of striking fear into any Allied fleet. Every sonar ping that returned with silence was both a relief and a reminder that at any moment one could come back different, sharper, nearer, alive. When the first faint echo returned on the sonar, no one spoke. The room fell silent except for the rhythmic pulse of the machine. "Contact bearing 128 degrees, range 1,800 yards," the sonar operator called out, his voice steady but eyes wide. Pendleton gave a single nod. Engines throttled back. The ship's Hedgehog anti-submarine launcher was readied. Every man aboard knew what was about to happen, yet none could predict what they were about to start. 12 days that would rewrite naval warfare forever. As the ship crept forward, the ocean seemed to close in around them. Beneath those waves lay the first target, an unsuspecting Japanese submarine, unaware that it had already been found. The crew braced themselves for the order. When Pendleton finally said, "Fire!" a line of deadly projectiles arced into the air, vanishing into the water with hollow thuds. Seconds later, the surface erupted, a bloom of white foam and black smoke twisting upward like a ghost. The men erupted in shouts, but Pendleton said nothing. He only watched the smoke fade, knowing this was just the beginning. The first explosion rolled across the Pacific like a heartbeat of thunder. A dark plume of smoke rose from the ocean surface as fragments of metal and oil slicks spread across the waves. The submarine I-16 had been caught off guard, struck before it could even send a distress signal. The crew of USS England stood frozen for a few seconds, realizing they had just achieved what few destroyer escorts ever managed, a confirmed submarine kill on their first run. Cheers erupted across the deck, echoing over the waves. Yet Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton remained silent. He watched the horizon, his face unreadable. In his mind, he knew the war beneath the sea had only just begun. As news of the sinking reached command, Pearl Harbor's intelligence center lit up with activity. Navy codebreakers confirmed that the submarine destroyed by USS England was part of a supply line critical to Japan's operations in the Bismarck Sea. What no one aboard the destroyer yet knew was that there were 5 more submarines operating along the same path. Every one of them was heading directly toward the sector that England now patrolled. By sheer chance, or something that felt like destiny, the small ship and her 200 crewmen were about to step into one of the most extraordinary streaks in naval history. By May 22, just days after their first victory, radar operators picked up a new echo, strong, distinct, and moving fast. The sonar room fell into absolute silence except for the soft pinging of the equipment. "Contact bearing 145 degrees, the operator whispered, his hands trembling slightly. Orders rippled through the corridors. The Hedgehog launchers were readied. Then, at Pendleton's calm order, "Fire!" the destroyer unleashed another deadly storm. Seconds later, a deep rumble tore through the ocean. The surface erupted in a massive plume of water. RO 106 was gone. 2 submarines in 2 days. The tension on board shifted to awe. Sailors who had once dreaded the monotony of patrol duty now moved with laser focus. Every man on board sensed that something bigger than luck was guiding them. In the wardroom, Pendleton gathered his officers and spoke plainly. "Each sub we destroy saves hundreds of American lives, but pride is a dangerous weapon. Don't let it fire back." His words grounded them. Out there, the sea was filled with invisible predators. Any mistake could turn the hunters into prey within seconds. May 23 brought another contact. This time, the submarine RO 104 attempted to fight back. It launched a spread of torpedoes, their wakes cutting through the blue water toward the destroyer. "Hard starboard," shouted the helmsman, and the ship swung violently. The torpedoes missed by yards. The crew responded instantly, sending their own pattern of hedgehog bombs into the depths. Moments later, another explosion churned the sea into chaos. When the sonar returned clear, it confirmed the impossible. England had sunk her 3rd submarine in less than 72 hours. Messages flooded in from the Pacific Fleet. Admiral Ernest King himself received the report and allegedly remarked, "Send me more ships like the England." But for Pendleton and his men, there was no time for celebration. The ocean still held more targets, and the thin line between glory and disaster was shrinking with every hour. The destroyer's engines roared once more as it turned into the night, chasing shadows under a moonlit sky. The impossible streak was only halfway done. The Pacific had turned gray under the heavy sky of May 24. After 3 consecutive victories, USS England continued her patrol across the Bismarck Sea, engines humming like a heartbeat of fate. The air carried the sour scent of oil from previous battles, and the sea, usually endless and indifferent, felt alive, restless, almost aware of what had happened. Sailors whispered that the ocean itself was taking sides. Every ripple, every shadow below seemed to carry a question. How long could one ship defy the odds? The crew tightened their routines, working with precision that bordered on superstition. Their confidence was growing, but so was the danger. Early that afternoon, sonar detected another contact. This one was subtle, faint, and moving erratically, as if the submarine below already knew it was being hunted. "Contact bearing 162, range 1,800 yards, the sonar operator called out, his voice breaking slightly. Lieutenant Pendleton ordered a silent pursuit. The ship's engines dropped to near whisper levels, propellers slicing water in complete discipline. For hours, they tracked the shadow beneath them, the tension rising with each sonar ping. Then, at 14:32 hours, the command came, "Fire!" and the Hedgehog launchers roared once again, sending a storm of 24 charges into the deep. The seconds stretched into eternity. The men waited for that distinct sound, a low, dull whump that meant a direct hit. Then it came, not once, but in quick succession. The explosion was enormous, shaking the entire hull. "We got her!" someone shouted. The enemy submarine, later identified as RO-116, was obliterated. It was the fourth kill in 5 days. The crew's cheers this time were quieter, mixed with awe. Even the most skeptical among them began to believe something almost supernatural was guiding them. They weren't just winning, they were rewriting the rule book of anti-submarine warfare. That night, the wind changed. Heavy clouds rolled in from the east, covering the stars. The ocean turned rough, the swells rising higher with each passing hour. Many sailors took it as an omen. The atmosphere inside the ship grew heavier, conversations shorter, eyes sharper. Pendleton sensed the tension and called for silence drills. No unnecessary lights, no talking during shifts. The men obeyed. Every creak of the hull sounded louder. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper from below. Somewhere out there, another submarine was listening. At dawn on May 26th, radar picked up movement once again. The contact was strong, almost too strong, as if the submarine wanted to be found. It was a trap. The Japanese RO-108 had received reports of England's success and intended to lure her into an ambush. But fate favored precision. Using sonar triangulation, Pendleton maneuvered the destroyer into a flanking position. The Hedgehog mortars fired again, each projectile a calculated strike born of experience. Seconds later, an enormous plume of water shot upward, followed by debris and oil. RO-108 was gone. 5 submarines in 6 days. The streak was no longer unbelievable. It was impossible. By now, USS England was being watched. Other American ships in the area altered their routes just to observe her in action. Admirals across the Pacific Fleet began to refer to her as the ship that could not miss. Her crew, exhausted yet disciplined, went about their duties like men possessed. But deep beneath their pride, a silent fear was beginning to grow. How long could perfection last before the ocean demanded payment? By May 27th, the USS England had become a legend whispered across every Allied ship in the Pacific. But inside her steel hull, the mood was different. The crew hadn't slept properly in days. The constant drills, sonar pings, and gunfire had left nerves stretched thin. Even the most seasoned sailors began to feel the weight of repetition, the eerie pattern of detection, pursuit, explosion, silence. The ocean that once felt vast now seemed claustrophobic, pressing in on all sides. The men had turned into machines of precision, but beneath their discipline lurked exhaustion, and with it, fear of one fatal mistake. That morning, as the tropical sun burned through the mist, the sonar room reported another faint contact. The tone of the report was different, weary, uncertain. "Possible contact bearing 180, came the voice, almost resigned. Lieutenant Commander Pendleton didn't hesitate. "Let's make sure," he replied quietly. The ship slowed, sonar pulses stretching into the deep. The signal faded, returned, then vanished entirely. For the first time, there was no follow-up. It wasn't a submarine at all, just a drifting thermal layer reflecting sound. The men sighed in frustration, realizing that even the ocean's natural patterns were now toying with their minds. As night fell, a storm gathered over the Bismarck Sea. Sheets of rain hammered the deck, the wind howling through cables and gun mounts. Lightning flashed across the horizon, illuminating waves that rose like dark walls around them. The destroyer shuddered, rolling violently in the surf. Below decks, sailors gripped pipes and railings to stay upright. One of them muttered, "It feels like the ocean's fighting back." No one laughed. Pendleton moved through the passageways, checking compartments personally, his calm presence the only anchor against chaos. The ship held steady, but barely. When the storm finally broke near midnight, the crew stepped onto the deck under a sky washed clean of clouds. The moonlight shimmered off the water like silver glass. In that stillness, they spotted wreckage floating nearby, pieces of wood, metal fragments, even a Japanese lifebelt. It wasn't from any of their previous kills. Intelligence later confirmed it came from RO-109, sunk hours earlier by another destroyer. The men stood in silence, staring at the floating debris illuminated by moonlight. Even their enemies, it seemed, were running out of time. On May 28th, radar picked up yet another contact. But this time, something felt wrong. The target wasn't behaving like a submarine. It was circling erratically, almost taunting them. Pendleton ordered a cautious approach. The ship moved in, sonar pinging every few seconds. Then suddenly, silence, total blackout. The contact vanished. Minutes later, the sonar burst to life again, this time with a closer echo. "She's right under us," the operator yelled. The command was instant. Hedgehogs fired, lighting the gray sky. A moment later, the ocean convulsed in a towering explosion. RO-105 was destroyed, the sixth confirmed submarine in 12 days. When the smoke cleared, no one cheered. The deck was quiet. The men looked around at each other, too tired to celebrate, too aware of the impossible streak they had achieved. Pendleton simply looked out at the horizon, the rising sun casting a golden line across the sea. "That's the end of it," he said quietly. "We've done our duty." But in the stillness that followed, even he couldn't shake the feeling that they had witnessed something beyond war, something that would never happen again. The news of USS England's record streak spread across the Pacific like wildfire. From Pearl Harbor to Brisbane, her name was spoken with reverence. 6 submarines in 12 days. It sounded impossible, a feat that defied logic and statistics. The ship's radio was flooded with congratulations, commendations, and orders to return to port for resupply. Yet inside the hull, the crew didn't feel like heroes. They felt empty. The last explosion still echoed in their ears, and the smell of gunpowder lingered on their uniforms. Pendleton walked the deck alone that evening, listening to the wind against the steel. "Perfection," he murmured quietly, "always comes with a price." When they finally reached Espiritu Santo for refitting, they were greeted like legends. Sailors from other ships lined the docks, cheering as the small destroyer escort pulled in. Brass bands played, reporters took photographs, and the Navy's senior officers shook Pendleton's hand as if greeting a national symbol. The men smiled for the cameras, but their eyes betrayed exhaustion. They had hunted shadows, and now those shadows haunted them in their sleep. Some woke in the middle of the night, hearing phantom sonar pings, or imagined explosions beneath their bunks. The human cost of perfection was beginning to show. Pendleton was awarded the Navy Cross, and the entire crew received Presidential Unit citations. Admiral Ernest King himself described USS England as a symbol of American precision and courage. But the crew knew that medals could not capture what they had experienced: the endless tension of tracking, the seconds of silence before each explosion, the debris that floated after. It all lingered. A legend had been born, not through glory, but through the unbearable repetition of killing unseen enemies who never had a chance to surface or surrender. By late 1944, the war was changing. Japan's submarine fleet had been crippled, and USS England was reassigned to escort and patrol duties near the Philippines. The men longed for normalcy, even boredom. They escorted convoys, rescued downed pilots, and watched the war drift away toward its bloody end. But beneath the calm routine, the ship carried the weight of its own legend. Every sailor aboard knew that no ship in history had ever matched what they had done, and that none ever would. In May 1945, fate finally caught up. Off the coast of Okinawa, USS England was struck by a kamikaze. The plane slammed into her port side, exploding on impact. Fires tore through the deck, ammunition cooked off, and smoke filled the air. 6 men were killed instantly, dozens wounded. The ship that had survived 12 days of hunting beneath the sea was nearly destroyed in 12 seconds. The surviving crew fought the flames for hours, refusing to abandon ship. Even in disaster, their discipline held. The same precision that had made them legends now kept them alive. When rescue ships arrived, USS England was still afloat, battered, scarred, but unbroken. She was towed back to port, her decks blackened, and her guns melted from the heat. Pendleton stood by her side as she was decommissioned months later. He said simply, "She did her duty," touching the railing one last time. The ship was scrapped in 1946, but her record stood untouched. 6 submarines in 12 days, a number that would forever remain unmatched, a streak born from courage, precision, and the relentless cost of perfection.
Years after the war ended, the ocean where USS England had once hunted lay quiet again. The waves rolled over invisible graves, 6 Japanese submarines resting on the seabed, their locations marked only on faded maps. Few ships in history had achieved what England had, and none ever repeated it. In naval academies, her name became a case study, not of luck, but of perfect coordination between human intuition, sonar technology, and leadership under pressure. For those who had served aboard, the Pacific was no longer just water, it was memory made eternal. Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton retired with honor, but carried the war with him. In interviews, he often spoke humbly of his crew, calling them ordinary men in extraordinary circumstances. He rarely discussed the streak itself. When he did, he emphasized not the triumph, but the teamwork. The young sonar operators, the gunners, the engineers who kept the engines alive through sleepless nights. "The ship worked like a single heart," he said once, and for 12 days that heart never missed a beat. Those words became etched into naval lore. For decades after, the legend of USS England lived quietly in museums and archives. Naval officers studying anti-submarine warfare analyzed her every maneuver. The hedgehog pattern she used became standard doctrine. Her radar tracking tactics taught in classrooms across the U.S. Navy. But outside military circles, her story faded from public memory. There were no Hollywood movies, no grand speeches, just the silence of history, keeping her secrets beneath the waves. Perhaps that was fitting. True precision, after all, rarely seeks applause. In 1962, a new ship was commissioned, the USS England, DLG-22, named to honor the destroyer escort's unmatched record. When the surviving crew members attended the ceremony, many stood in silence, tears in their eyes. The new vessel was faster, larger, equipped with guided missiles and radar systems far beyond anything the 1944 ship could have imagined. Yet when the flag was raised, one of the old sailors whispered, "She'll never match her spirit." They all knew that the soul of the First England had been forged not by machinery, but by courage. Years later, deep-sea expeditions confirmed the locations of the submarines she had destroyed. Photographs showed twisted hulls resting quietly in darkness, coral growing over rusted steel. Time had transformed wreckage into reefs, life blooming where death once ruled. For historians, these discoveries were confirmation. For the families of the men who fought and died there, American and Japanese alike, it was closure. The ocean at last had made peace with itself. Today, USS England's name endures as a reminder of what discipline, teamwork, and quiet bravery can achieve. Her record, 6 submarines in 12 days, remains unmatched. But her true legacy is something deeper. The understanding that perfection is fleeting, and that even in war, precision and humanity can coexist. Every time a modern sonar pulse echoes through the deep, a faint reply seems to come back from 1944, the heartbeat of a ship that refused to miss a beat.